Hello Year 12, Mr. Trowell here, coming at you live and direct from my flat. I don't have a webcam, so I can't do Zoom. I have to borrow my girlfriend's laptop every time, and she gets annoyed at me because she wants to watch reruns of the OC 24/7. So you're going to have to deal with some audio. She's laughing in the background, but it's true. So the rest of this term we're going to be preparing for our creative writing exam. This lesson, actually that's not true. Up until your mocks, we're going to be preparing for a creative writing mock, and then we're going on back onto NEA. This lesson, we are going to look at the structure of the actual exam. We're going to look at the mark scheme briefly. We're going to look at two examples that students typed up last year from two of current year 13. And in the second part, we're going to focus basically on first person perspective, and we're going to look at how you create a specific character's voice. Reminder, your mock will have a creative writing element. It will also have a language issues element. So there'll be three questions. You'll choose one of them from child language acquisition, language and power, and accent and dialect. Our advice would be revise two of those. So you've got a choice. Revise the theorists, revise the key terms, revise some texts that you can link in. But don't revise all three. Revise two so you've got a choice when the question comes up, because you may think the question's an absolute stinker. In fact, I might have even done it on purpose. I haven't, but I might have done, but I haven't. Or have I? No, I haven't. In the real creative writing exam, you get a choice of two texts which are a source material. So it might be an extract from a story, it might be a news report, it might be a diary entry, it could be anything, but they want you to use that source in your response to your question. In the real exam, for each piece of source material, there are two writing tasks, and you have to write a commentary for one of your writing tasks. Now, in the mock, we are going to give you two texts as a source material, so you still get a choice, but each one will only have one writing task attached to it and a commentary. So you might have an extract from a newspaper, and you have to write a novel, an extract from a novel with it, and a commentary, and then the second piece might be an advert for, I don't know, I'm looking at a tree, an advert for a tree, and you then have to write a protest leaflet for a person who likes trees and a commentary for that. I hope that makes sense. It could be fiction, it could be non-fiction. Often they'll have one of each, and the format can be absolutely anything. So it might be a speech, it might be a radio advert, it might be a specific genre, romance, horror, it might be a thriller, it might be any sort of non-fiction task, but they'll throw in anything in there. And the most important thing is that reading the question is really, really important. Reading it really thoroughly, highlighting the keywords of the question. We'll have a look at that in a moment. But that's the most important thing, because it'll tell you everything you need to know about genre, purpose, audience, tone, all the sorts of language features you want to include. There are no other elements to this paper. So on the creative writing paper, it is creative writing, and that is it. Let's take a quick 3 or 4 minute look at the mark scheme. The only thing which is assessed in the creative writing paper, something just fell off my screen, it's a little crocodile I've got, is A05, which is demonstrate expertise and creativity in the use of English to communicate in different ways, and that's basically just creative writing in fancy words. If you look at the mark scheme, you'll see several words that pop up again and again. The first of those is expression, and by that they mean written expression, which is basically SPAG plus. So it's spelling, punctuation and grammar, also your choice of individual words, how you express yourself, all those things. You might see me comment on written expression in essays sometimes, which is about the clarity of how you express your ideas. They also repeatedly flag up linguistic and stylistic choices, and that's the English language bit of it, really. It's things like, have you deliberately used I don't know, oxymorons, metaphors, similes, hyponyms, hyponyms, archaisms? Have you specifically considered the individual language choices, the grammatical choices you've made, the types of sentences, active, passive voice, first, third, second person? They also talk about the audience. Who are you writing for? 90% of teenage readers are girls, so if you're writing an extract from a teen novel, you might expect to have a female main character because most of them do. You don't have to be as specific as that, but have you really considered who is likely to read your text and how you're going to appeal to them? And then in bold and a font size bigger is genre, because that is the key deal. Basically, if you can write a piece which sounds like the sort of thing it's supposed to sound like, for example, if you're writing an extract from a horror story, if it sounds like a horror story, you will get at least a C, even if it's not great. If it doesn't, you're going to struggle, regardless of how good the rest of it is, to get into the B-A range. So the most important thing is, does it sound like the thing it's supposed to sound like? Moving on, you'll see as we move from band 2, 3, 4 or 5, different words pop up, and those words are some, competent, purposeful and confident. I haven't bothered with band 1 because none of us are in band 1 already, so we're all going to do better than that. So some means basically you can do it some of the time. Some of the time this sounds like a horror story. Some of the time your spelling and grammar is correct. Competent means you're doing it most of the time. Purposeful means you're doing things which are deliberate choices. So you have picked a character purposefully which would fit a detective novel. You've picked, I don't know, what do detective novels tend to have? They tend to feature alcoholics. I don't know what I say. You've picked some 46-year-old alcoholic ex-police detective. Or you've picked someone with, I don't know, if you think about like Sherlock Holmes or people like that, they often have, I don't know, sort of autistic tendencies maybe. So you've picked someone like that, or Monk. I don't know if you've seen Monk. It's sick. YouTube the theme tune for Monk, because it's got a great theme tune as well. And then at the top end is confident. Now, confident is a hard thing to reach, and actually it's a hard thing to mark as well. So that band 5 confident is really someone who feels comfortable in the piece of writing that they're doing and is able to do it really fluently. So it might be that you get lucky on the day and you happen to read, let's think of one of you, Haroon gets lucky on the day and he's asked to write a section from an erotic romance novel aimed at middle-aged women, and luckily that's all Haroon reads. So he's really comfortable and really confident in doing that, and that's the sort of thing you're looking for. It's that real creativity and flair and originality and skillful language choices. I said 4 minutes, that was a bit over, sorry guys. Before we look at some examples, just some really basic tips. Number one, tense. Okay, this is a thing that people fall down on again and again and again. You don't have to write very much, so it should be easy to stick in one tense, but for some reason, for some of you, it's not. So stick in one tense. Don't try and do anything fancy. Past tense is usually easier. You know, tell a story or something like that as if it's already happened and you're thinking back of it. In the same vein, stick with one perspective. You cannot successfully jump around characters in 300, 400 words. It's just impossible. So stick with one person's perspective. As I've said before, genre is absolutely key. I'm not going to bang on about that. And spend more time planning and thinking about the features to include than you might think you need to. Typically, the tasks are 300 to 400 words. I don't think I've ever seen one over 400, and I've definitely seen some that are 250. And you get about 40 minutes, half an hour for each question, which is a lot of time to write not many words. So you really need to think carefully about what you need to include in terms of specific language choices, who the audience is, how you're going to match the genre. Example, write the script for a TV advert for the children's cereal mentioned in the piece. In this example, we're imagining we've just read an extract from a novel in which some snotty brat-nosed kid is at the supermarket and demands his mum buys him, I don't know, not Cocoa Pops, some fancy cereal. He's at Whole Foods and he wants a chocolate maple crunch muesli or something like that. So let's look at the question. It's a script. Okay, so if you write a paragraph, you're not going to get it right. You need to have spoken language features in there. You might need to have, if you've got different people talking, in the margins, the person that's speaking at that moment. Secondly, it's a TV advert. There might be a jingle in the background because that's what TV adverts have. You might have in brackets, delicious bowl of cereal appears on screen, missing all health information or something like that. You might have that it's the voice of a particular celebrity because often it's some moron trying to influence us to buy things. I don't know, maybe they've got Mark What's-his-face from The Only Way is Essex to try and sell us Cocoa Pops, and he's like Essex accent. Oh, all I have for breakfast is Cocoa Pops, and they're like right nice. That sounds like more like someone from EastEnders. I don't know. And it's a children's cereal, so it's probably not going to be Mark from The Only Way is Essex. So we're going to, it's going to be that JoJo person from YouTube. She's really annoying. Anyway, who the audience is children. There's going to be simple language. There's going to be lots of exclamation marks in there. It's going to be enthusiastic. They're going to talk about fun as if a cereal can be fun. A cereal can't be fun. And they want you to use the piece which you've just read to help you. So think about what descriptions you're given. If it is Maple Choco Crunch from Whole Foods, you know, think about how that will be advertised. It'd be to an upmarket audience. It might actually be advertised to the mum because Cocoa Pop's marketing strategy might be to get the kids to nag the mum as much as possible, whereas Whole Foods are probably appealing more to the health-conscious, discerning, upper middle-class consumer. Now let's try and put the mark scheme into action. The question that this student was answering, and it was a homework piece that Year 13 did, was write the opening of a romance novel. Sorry, I just scrunched a sweet wrapper. All I want you to do is read through and think, would I say that's a band 2, 3, 4 or 5? Are they doing the things they need to do sometimes? Are they doing them competently? Are they doing them purposefully? Or are they doing them confidently? And remember, does it sound like the thing it's supposed to sound like is a good way of discussing that. So pause this video for 30 seconds, or I can make a like beeping noise for 30 seconds. No, that'd be really distracting. Pause it for 30 seconds. Have a look through, see if you can pick out some bits. So maybe you picked out some of these things, maybe you picked out some of the other things. There is a degree of subjectivity to marking creative writing, and more so than there is in other aspects of the exam. And at the same time, a good piece is still good and a bad piece is still bad. It's just a case of how good or how bad. So some of the things I picked out were steamy vapor escapes, which is a really nice atmospheric way of starting the piece off, as well as being a really early example of personification. and that matches the second example, which is softly whispering against the honking of cabs. We've got some nice juxtaposition there. Oh, I went all northern. We've got some right nice juxtaposition there, with softly whispering and honking, or should I say onking, of cabs. So again, we can see that they're really trying to create this atmospheric, gentle tone at the opening. The next thing I picked out was crowds of couples, and I've stuck that in italics because I think it's less successful. I don't know, I just don't think the image of couples is of just two people together, whereas crowds is lots of people all at the same time. So there's a slight mismatch there. I know what they're trying to achieve, but and I think this next bit is quite skillful. The bitterness of the winter air is all but a stimulus for gentlemanly kindness, which sounds a little bit old-timey, but it's supposed to sound a little bit old-timey. And we get later on, which I haven't put in bold, but could have done, sacrificial bid to win her heart, which kind of gets this idea of courtly love across, you know, knights in shining armour. So the task was to write the opening of a romance novel. What have they done? Well, they've created this nice atmospheric, gentle, soft start. They have included some specific vocab, love, couples, heart, which would match with that. They've used some nice personifications, some nice similes, metaphors. Have they used a simile? Maybe they haven't used a simile. Some nice metaphors. And they've also tried to use this sort of old-timey tone, which you often see in romance novels. So it's definitely not some, and I would say it's not competent either. It's beyond competent, because the choices they're making are purposeful. They are doing some things on purpose, and they've carefully considered the genre. So for me, this is at the top end of band 4 or the lower end of band 5. It's obviously quite hard to tell on just a single paragraph, but hopefully you can see where some of those choices and some of the sorts of things that people might do in an exam pay off. On the next slide, we're going to have a look at another one. Same again then, but we've got a different task this time. Again, this is a year 13 student. Again, this was a homework piece, and the task was to write a section of a novel in which a character reflects on a traumatic experience. So we might break that question down. Section of a novel, we don't have to introduce characters, because a novel is anything that's over, I think it's over 15,000 words and it becomes a novel. I think that's the definition. But anyway, there's going to be lots of character establishment that's happened early on. Reflects on a traumatic experience, so we're expecting past tense, certainly. We might think about what sort of character might have a traumatic experience. We might think about what that experience might be, and we might think about the audience, because that would probably be people who are interested because they might have experienced some trauma themselves, or it might be, I mean, it's, I don't want to be too gendered about it, but it's probably going to be a female reader here. So, same as before, read it through, have a think, some, competent, purposeful or confident. It's not going to be band 1. Are they doing the things they need to sometimes? Are they doing them competently, so most of the time? Are they doing them purposefully, like we saw in that last piece? Or are they doing them confidently, with real skill and real perception? Have a look, 30 seconds. I'm not going to make beeping noise, but you know what you're doing. You'll probably see straight away there's a bit more italics on this one, because I don't think it's as strong. So hopefully, even if you weren't 100% sure, you could see that this wasn't as good a piece as the first one. So let's have a look at what I've picked out. I remember it vividly. Past tense, the idea that it's a traumatic experience, all of that comes across very quickly in a nice short sentence. And the short sentence also works well to open the piece off. And it adds some of those dramatic tension hooks that make the reader want to read on. I put, but I had a fear of being alone, in italics, because this is an example of telling, not showing. I want them to show me that they were alone. I kept checking at the curtains. I sat on the sofa not wanting to move, whatever it is, but show me that the character is afraid of being alone. Don't tell me. The next bit in italics is just a spag error. They did this. This isn't me making it up, but they didn't leave a space, bizarrely, because it was handwritten as well. Oh no, it wasn't. It was typed. Take it all back. Between fear and all. So if we think back to that written expression part of A05, they're not going to be meeting that. And again, where that's a problem. But hours later, Mum was still not home and I was worried about her. All the worst case scenarios came to my mind about what could have happened. That's a really clumsy, long sentence. Probably needs to be broken into two. Having said that, they're still using those narrative hooks to build tension, and they're building up a picture of what this traumatic experience is going to be. So do we think this is sometimes doing what it needs to? Is it competently most of the time? Is it purposeful or is it confident? Well, it's not confident very clearly. It isn't purposeful either. It'd probably be harsh to say it's only doing it some of the time, because it does get the general idea, and it does sort of mostly sound like someone who is reflecting on a traumatic experience. It does mostly sound like a novel written in the past tense. So I'd say this one is probably the lower end of band 3, so just into the competent. Hopefully that makes sense. You probably want to move on to a clean piece of paper now, with the title of first person writing, narrative, perspective, whatever you want to put. All I'd like you to do is jot down maybe 3, 5, 7, 8 features you would expect to see in first person writing. Okay, so think about it carefully. It should be an exercise which takes you 2 to 3 minutes. If we were doing this in class, this is the sort of time where I go and pester Miss Malt about something or pick something up from the photocopier, because I want you to spend a decent amount of time on it. So pause the video. We're going to come back to that list that you've just made after we've read the short story, because hopefully what will happen is you will read through it, and you might want to add to that list the sweet short story, because it's sweet, is from a collection of short stories, shameless plug for book club, that we're reading for book club at the moment, that are really good, and they are about the Vietnam War. Can't say I normally read stuff about the Vietnam War, but it's a pretty good book. And the one we're going to look at is called The Sweetheart of the Song Tra Bong, and it'll probably take you about 15 minutes to read, something like that. I don't know, there's not a race, and if it was, you're only racing yourself. So pause the video now, have a read through. It is in first person, so have a look and think, can I add anything to my list? It's an unusual one as well, because it's a first person narrative in which someone tells the main character what happened in first person themselves. So it's kind of like this double thing. But anyway, have a read, enjoy. Now you've finished that, have a think, just add anything else to your list. How is the author exploiting the first person narrative? I'm going to focus in on the first paragraph and unpick that, but is there anything else? Because it's a very skillful piece of writing and it's very well done, and I hoped you liked the bit with the necklace of tongues. Or maybe not, but then remember, people do eat tongue, like that's an actual food. It goes in pies and things. I think it's mostly old people. I don't know. Like and subscribe if you eat tongue on the regular and not in like a euphemistic way. So the first thing I want to talk about is the proper nouns, the names. So Rat Kiley and Alpha Company. Alpha Company fits in with the genre, which is a war novel, but it's a bit impersonal. It doesn't really add to the first person narrative, but Rat Kiley definitely does. Rat Kiley is clearly a nickname, unless someone was cruel enough to call their son Rat, and that's a feature of first person writing. Normally in the third person narrative we'd expect the character to be introduced by their full name, or at least their formal first name. It would be Scarlet, not Scar. So that helps build up that idea of a first person narrative. We also get some sort of little features of speech, almost things like swore up and down. That doesn't amount to much of a warranty. They're not quite, I suppose they're idioms really more than anything else, and they work as metaphors here. Rev up the facts is another example. The next bit is the sentence. If Rat told you, for example, that he'd slept with 4 girls one night, you could figure it was about a girl and a half, which is this little use of humour, and again helps build up the character through the narrative. We're learning about the narrator through the first person dialogue, that he, he's a little bit flippant, likes to poke fun at things, I suppose. And finally, we get this nice semantic field of maths at the end. Calculations, subtracting superlatives, square root, or multiplying the maybes. Which again kind of works out with that about a girl and a half in building up the character's voice. So what this opening paragraph does better than anything else is establishes the voice of the character. Remember when I talked about the second example, telling rather than showing? This is very much showing all the way through. We're being shown what the character's like rather than being told what they're like. We don't say, I can't remember who the author is now or who the main character is, but anyway, we don't say so-and-so was flippant and liked to make sarcastic comments and made up weird nicknames. We see it firsthand, so it's a really good way of doing that. We're going to practice some of these skills on the next slide. Okay, so your turn. You guys are going to have a go at practicing using the first person voice. And you can use any of these as a prompt, and I've given you a specific person, and it's probably not someone who you would naturally gravitate towards because I want you to try and push yourself a little bit. So, write an extract from a story in which a 55-year-old man comes home to tell his wife he has been unexpectedly fired. So we're thinking about what sort of person might read this story, and also what that person, the narrator, might sound like. Now you can choose to do the 55-year-old man, or you can be the wife, doesn't matter. But think about building up using those first person features. Second option, write the opening of a novel in which a mother remembers a time her young daughter Gracie hurt herself. I don't know why I've called her Gracie, but I have. So yeah, we're going to do about that. You can decide how old the mother is. It might have been that Gracie hurt herself yesterday. It might have been that it's 10 years ago. You can decide how serious the injury was. Maybe she just scratched her knee. Maybe she lost both her arms and legs. No, I'm joking. It's a bit of a macabre joke. Sorry, Gracie. Or final option, write a section of a novel in which a person in their 30s is planning how to break up with their partner. There are no Freudian meanings to this one, by the way. So again, you can decide. I mean, there's quite a lot of freedom in that one. Which partner is it? Why? Reasons? Are they really annoyed? Is it going to be dead easy for them? Is it going to be something really difficult? Yada, yada, yada. Up to you. I would like you to send that to me though, please. So word count, you want to know a word count. You're aiming for 250 to 400 words, which is not many. It's probably 2 or 3 decent paragraphs or a page of A4. But have a go at practicing all the things, and you know what, why not tag along with it where you think you are in the mark scheme. Do you think you are in the text is too small for me to read? Are you some? Are you competent? Are you purposeful? Or are you confident? Okay, so email it to me, have a go, put a little comment, and don't be like shy and don't be boastful. Just say where you genuinely think you are. Yeah, there are people out there in the groups who know who you are, who are always mean about themselves and don't do themselves down. Don't. Be honest. If you think that you are confident, say, I'm confident here. Okay, all right. Bye.